Today we have our first guest. We actually have the first episode where a guest is joining us, and I think this episode already is a great example of what we are trying to achieve with this podcast. And it shows that there are so many elements that surround the care of our animals without directly getting into the care of our animals. And I think this is a great example of that. So I want to thank Jonas for joining us, and I hope everybody listening enjoys this episode. Welcome to the European Herpetoculture podcast. My name is Stefan. Today joining me is Flo. Hi, Flo.
Hello, guys.
And we actually have our first guest. So this is going to be the first episode with an actual guest, and that is Jonas. Welcome, Jonas.
Hello, guys. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for joining us and to start this off being the first guest. We are really excited about this.
Yeah, I feel honored to be a first guest, actually. Yeah.
You should. No.
Yeah.
No, but that's great to hear. We are it's cool to learn together. We are really looking forward to doing this episode. So before we are gonna get into the topics we thought about discussing today, maybe it's cool for the listener to get a bit of insight in your history in the hobby, and also how you reached the point you are now. And maybe it's cool to just get started right away.
Of course, yeah, sure. So, as sure many people listening to this podcast and many guests you will have on, I pretty much the same. I've always been into animals and nature and plants and stuff. So I always had like this natural interest to keep them and care for them also. So I started out with like little fish tanks, with snails in them and little guppies and stuff. Then we had two turtles, budgie, parakeets, and all that stuff, and then like the regular pets basically. And then I started to be more and more interested in like actually keeping reptiles, or geckos were my first love, if you could say. So because I was so interested in animals, my parents used to take me to zoos and stuff. And sometimes when I visited my grandma, we would go to this like really cool pet store. I think at the time I thought it was cool. And it was like a small pet store, but they had like a lot, and I was always a bit scared of the rodents, actually. I always like try to get past the rodent section to get to the reptiles, because I'm not really into rats and hamsters and stuff. But then I checked out the reptiles, and they had like these cool geckos, like house geckos and felsumas and stuff. And I thought like, oh wow, you can actually keep them in like this little terrarium. So I was fascinated about that. But of course, like I was a little child, and it took a bit of convincing my parents to actually allow me to keep an animal. And first they actually started with telling me that I should read books on them, or I had this natural interest to read everything I could get about them. So I would read books that were available at the time, and always got I also got some reptile magazines, which is like a really nice intro to the hobby, I think, because like you read a good reptile magazine, and then you start to think like, wow, this is possible actually. Like people can keep green iguanas in like these huge tanks. And then there's another person writing an article about how to breed these dart frogs or whatever, and then you get like a very broad overview what the hobby actually can be, So then of course, like iguanas and stuff were not a possibility. And so I saw some red anoles at a store, and then of course I knew about them from all the books and magazines that I used to read, and I was like really interested in like these cool little green and brown lizards. And the fact that they can change color a little bit. And Yeah, so that was my first actual pet reptile, if you will. My pet lizard was a green
Mm,
anole. Then I got another one, so it was a pair, and then I was really into anoles. Like I love everything about them, like the color
mm,
changing and the dewlap and generally the behavior, you know. So I still really like anoles. I don't currently keep them. Um, and then you know, then as a teenager, maybe you shift your focus a little bit to other things, you know. Maybe you do some some dumb stuff, you know. You waste your
mm.
time with some stuff, and then the hobby kind of goes into the background a little bit, you know.
Mm,
And I had this one after my green anoles died. I had this one really cool anole species that was Anolis valencieni, like the
mm.
Jamaican twig anole,
Jo,
which
dope.
is yeah, I had those, and it was man. So that's when I started to be like more into the a bit rare stuff, you know,
Mhm.
like not the stuff that you regularly see at the pet store. And I say pet store because back then I didn't really visit expos yet, you know.
Mhm.
But I saw these at a pet store and I was like, dude, what is this? This is really cool to know, right? And then I was digging through my magazines and I actually found an article about them, which is cool. So I kind of had a basis of how to care for them. And yeah, I had an empty terrarium where my green anoles used to live a
Mhm.
couple months ago. And then I acquired these Jamaican twig anoles. And sadly, the male ate the female for some reason.
Damn. Okay.
It's one of these anole species. I think some of them have it where the male gets like huge, or there's like a really big size difference
Mhm.
between male and female. And it was like that when I bought them, and they got along quite good. But all of a sudden, when I was visiting a friend for a week, my mother called me and she said, I think we have to tell you something. So
Oh,
the
damn.
male ate the female. And I was like, oh
Oh,
no.
shit.
And yeah, I couldn't find a female for him again actually, so I kept this lone male Twiganol. And yeah, after he passed, I think, let me think, then I had a pair of brown anoles, so I kind of went through different anole species. And it was like I didn't really think about it. It was just something that I did, you know. I didn't really try to exchange with other keepers. It was
Mhm.
just something that I did, you know. I went to school, I got home, I took care of the anoles, I did whatever, you know. And um it's just always like just getting the info from the books, you know. But then when the browner nose, I wasn't really successful with them, unfortunately. They had like some sort of disease and they passed away quite
Mhm.
quickly. I think they were wild caught. So yeah, so I wasn't really successful with them. And then I thought, okay, maybe let's give this whole thing a break. And I didn't have any animals for a little while. But I realized like it's such a big part of my life that I started always to research, you know, like what other cool species are out there or
Mhm.
what I would like to keep. And one day my mother comes home with like this very small terrarium. And she said she got it from a colleague of hers and she used to keep a tarantula in there. And she's like, oh, she doesn't need this terrarium anymore. You want to have it? And I'm like, yeah, but so I was still living with my parents at the time. So I'm like, yeah, but you don't allow me to keep tarantulas, do you? And she's like, no,
Mhm.
well, it's not that bad. She used to keep it. It can't be that bad. But I thought about it and I'm like, I don't think I want to keep tarantulas in there. And
Mhm.
then I remembered from some book that I read, there's like this really cool genus of very small geckos. The least geckos you call them, or
Mhm.
like yeah, the scientific name is Spherodactylus. And I remembered that, and I'm like, I'm sure you could keep them in there, you know, in like this little
Yeah.
tarantula terrarium type setup. And I'm like, and then the plan started to develop really. And I researched them, and I found a really good page with like care sheets of different species. And turns out the guy that created the page just lived like an hour away from me. So I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
that's cool. And I wrote to him on Facebook and he's like, yeah, sure, you can have some. And for starters with these small geckos, if you never kept them before, I would recommend you these two species. And then I made like the choice which species I want to keep, and then I got a pair from him, and it was like, and that's where I feel like my actual you know, journey into like the more serious herpetoculture
Mm.
started, because I had a very rare species with like very distinct how do you call it, you know, conditions that you have to provide. um they're actually quite hardy, but at the time it was something really new for me to keep geckos that are
Mm.
like this small. You know, it's very different from anoles or leopard geckos or anything.
Yeah.
So that was like very, very interesting. And at first I didn't really see them. Sometimes, you know, they would hide and they were very shy. And I'm like, oh, maybe this is going bad. Maybe this is not successful. I'm not even sure if they're alive sometimes, you know, because I
Mm.
don't see them for a week or something. And then I'm, oh man. And all of a sudden they started to become less shy. And the female I still have today, she's like almost 10 years old now. And
Damn.
she's still laying eggs. Yeah, yeah. And she's not shy at all. Like she knows me. Like she comes to the glass and sort of like checks out if I if I'm going to feed them and stuff. And yeah, and then they started laying eggs. Like I found little eggs in there, and then a little gecko heads that are super, super tiny, you know. And then you have to provide springtails and very small fruit flies. And um so that was kind of like my entry point into the more serious, um when I took the hobby more seriously, you know, and when
Mm.
I actually yeah, took a deep dive into like these small feeder insects, for example. And that's something that you know, that you can take away from like herpetoculture, I think, because at first I was not really interested in insects, right? I wanted to keep
Mm.
lizards. But when you deal with insectivorous lizards, at some point you have to deal with insects, you know.
Yeah.
And then I started getting into isopods. You know, I didn't know it was a thing, but then I started researching, and some people feed them little isopods, right? And I didn't know
Yeah.
it was a thing, and it's just a hobby in and of itself, you know. So it's
Another rabbit hole, right? It's like
oh, for
diving,
sure,
never-ending
yeah,
story.
man, and yeah, and it was really cool. So all of a sudden, I had on next to the terrarium, I had like a box with little isopods. And then I found like actual joy in like feeding them and like having some extra pets that are actually that provide food for my geckos, you know. So um yeah, and then I really started nerding out from there.
Yeah, I mean, but that's great, man. To be honest, it's like
Yeah.
what I found interesting. Um, I think you started like with a pretty small collection, right? So
Oh yeah, I always
it
just
was,
had one tank.
yeah,
Yeah.
because like for me it was like I got into the hobby and I wanted quickly a lot of more animals, you know? But
Mm.
what I hear, what you're telling is like you only had like a few animals over the years and then you started to collect more, right? So it
Yeah.
was like a longer period of time where you only had like one or two species. Is this is this correct?
Yeah.
Or
I always
yeah.
had like, yeah, no, always one species actually. Always had like one tank, and then there was this one species of a anole living in there, and I kept them like until like they passed away, because anoles don't live that long. They live like
Mhm.
5 years, maybe 6 years, you know. And then again with the brown anoles, I wasn't very successful, and then I always had this one tank that's made for anoles. And then like I took a little break and started to reevaluate things. And then I had this really small terrarium for the Spherodactylus.
So,
And
yeah.
the turning point was why I kept expanding the hobby from there on, was because they were laying eggs, you know. So I had to
Mhm.
provide for the little babies, you know. A little Spherodactylus you can keep in like a little box, right?
Fuck.
But
So
then there's another hatchling, right? Then you have a second box, you know, and then you have all these boxes, and then you're like, they're so cute. I actually don't want to give them away, you know what I mean? And then you start collecting these little geckos, and my brother used to tell me, like, dude, you gotta get another species. You're so successful with them. Get another Spherodactylus species. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want to like do this too quickly, you know. I don't want to expand too quickly. But at the end, I got a second species, and then I was able to trade actually, you know. I have a pair of this species, another one, somebody else has a pair of another interesting species, and then you can trade. Like, yeah, that's really cool actually as a breeder, you know, this whole trading thing, if you will, because you are looking to expand your hobby a little bit. You are looking to, yeah, collect new species, if you will. And if the opportunity presents itself, right, why not trade, you know, for you give away something and then you get something cool in return. And that's how it went for me with the geckos. Yeah.
It sounds like your collection grew pretty organically
Mm-hmm.
then. Just
That's
breeding,
perfectly put.
trading,
Yeah.
expanding it. Oh, that's such a nice way, because I think what Flow gives us, for example, is what happens a lot. So it's nice to
Yeah.
hear also how it can be different. I do wonder, before we get into what you are doing now, because this was all great stuff, but I wondered, um, you started by mostly doing it on your own, reading books, magazines that you could get, the pet store.
Yeah.
So the information you got was pretty select and limited, but also in a magazine, yeah, we read the whole book in the hopes that we find something really interesting. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you started to get back into it with the Spherodactylus, and you actually met somebody, and then you started to breed them and expand on them, and you found that page on internet, has the way you look for info, or how that info influences you, changed? And also, has it changed the way you are approaching your hobby?
A little bit, yes. I would say that every care sheet that you read in a book, you have to take with a grain of salt, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because that's one person describing what worked for them. You know, that's something that I see because you can have two care sheets for the same species, and in like some key points, they're actually very different. And then you ask yourself, why is that? Why is somebody giving them like this big tank and like these temperatures in this area of the terrarium, and another person keeping them in a bit smaller tank with like much more constant temperatures, and then but it's working for both of them. So what I think what changed is that, yeah, gather as much information as you can from all the different sources, whether that's of course reading or talking to people, which is also great. um, but then you have to find your own way, because like
Mm-hmm.
that's the reality, you know, you cannot replicate exactly what another person did. You know, you have to find your own way how to get there, and there's many ways to get to a certain point. You know, what kind of lights are you using? Are you using
Mm-hmm.
two 20-watt bulbs, or are you using one 40-watt bulb? You know, so that's an easy example, but there's so many ways to keep a species successfully, and that's like I think that has changed a little bit. And then um, yeah, I think that's the main thing to answer your question. Yeah. So always take it with a grain of salt. If there's a care
Mm-hmm.
sheet, it's not like this is the only way to do it. It's one way that one person had success with it. But if you like take out the essential information, it's almost like, oh, they need a bromation, and this person did it for 6 weeks. Why aren't they doing it for 8 weeks or 10 weeks? You know? Oh, just because? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
why? Like you gotta ask some questions, you know? Ask yourself some questions, yeah. And also what changed is I got connected within the scene a lot more, because all of a
Mm-hmm.
sudden I was actually breeding these animals. um and then I had to make like contacts with different people. Hey, you want to buy these geckos? This is how I keep them. So you
Mm-hmm.
start to connect with more people, and then of course my mentor, as you could say, the guy that created the Zwerg geckos, dwarf geckos page. I went to his place and I saw how he kept them, and he told me a couple things. And um so what I'm saying is, like, yeah, I started to really dive into the hobby a little more, just expanding to some more species, but also getting to know more people. So that's what changed at this point. And yeah.
Yeah, I think like with the information, it's like everything you read or everything that you get on information, you always have to take it with a grain of salt. Also, when you are on, let's say, looking for weather data in an area that the animal is coming from, right? Or a YouTube video, and it's only like one location where the data is from, and it's like, yeah, there's like different microclimates and stuff like that. So I think that's very important to the listeners, that they like, especially when you are starting to dive deeper in the hobby, and you have so much information, and yeah, I think you have to walk your own path a little bit and explore
Yeah,
stuff. And maybe I think it even like we all been there, like when an animal died because like maybe you did something wrong, but it's like part of the whole learning experience. I think you can't do it
of
like
course.
perfectly. That's not possible. And on the one hand, it's like not that great for the animal, but on the other hand, it's like it's the way of life, let's just say, or the way of the hobby. Yeah.
And that's what makes the hobby interesting, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And I have a friend that has nothing to do with reptiles.
Mm.
And he asked me like, so I see what you're doing and it's kind of cool, but why are you doing this?
Hmm.
And I had to think about it for a second, and I was like, I think I like the problem solving aspect of it in a
Yeah.
way, because you have this dream of keeping an exotic lizard, which is cool, but it comes with a set of like challenges, and you
Hmm.
have to kind of problem solve. How do I keep the species? How do I provide the correct parameters?
Yeah.
And or how do I get them to breed? What do they actually need? What triggers them? And yeah, stuff like that. So
I
yeah,
think it's always like people that are not in the hobby, I think sometimes they ask the best questions because like they have like no idea, and then sometimes they are so simple that they are really hard to answer, right? And
right.
also they have like, yeah, they don't have like different experiences or something like that. So it's always great to also listen to like non-reptile people.
Yeah. Definitely. So I wanted to ask you guys, so how do you go about like when you have the chance to work with a new species that you have never worked before and the information is kind of scarce, there's not a lot of
Mhm.
info out there. How do you go about this?
If there's Well, I only almost keep captive bred. So there's always the
Mhm.
first source is, of course, the person I'm getting them from.
Mm-hmm.
But if there is not a lot of info on that species in particular, I will start with indeed the environment just to get a baseline. As Flo says, there's so many microclimates, but I
Mhm.
think maybe you can confirm that as reptile keepers, as soon as we start to approach the hobby from that space, we can translate, a certain environment and then what happens at the substrate or what happens at the bark or at the canopy. So I start there and I look for similar animals in the same area.
Mm.
And I check on iNaturalist what other animals are found there. And I used to use use that as a baseline and then just use the experiences I've had with other species in combination with what the keeper says to me, the breeder, and I just
Mm-hmm.
try
Mhm.
to implement that in my way. But as you
Okay.
say, I think it really also depends on your own situation because every reptile room or living room the animal is in is so
Mhm.
different. So you have to know what environment you are in yourself
Mhm.
Yes.
also
That's
to
true.
see how you can
Yeah.
manipulate that into the right conditions. Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
if your room gets super hot during summer, like you have to take that into consideration. Maybe you don't need as much heat bulbs as the other person
Mhm.
or something like that. So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I remember
That's
this
exactly.
true.
also because I was at Munster at the EZS
Mhm.
where they held all the turtles and they have all the turtles in the greenhouse
Yeah.
and none of those turtles had basking spots, at least
Mhm.
almost none of them. So at first I was like, they should have a basking spot, that was my
Yeah.
typical brain. But then I was like, oh wait, there's so much infrared here through all the glass that's penetrating into the organs of those animals that you don't need a basking spot. You have the
Yeah.
sun who does that, and I don't. I have a roof. So as
Mhm.
you say, there are so many factors that can impact what you need to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's true.
Definitely.
Yeah, but like
Yeah.
with for example the Enialides, that was like there's almost no information out there, right? So I did like Stefan. I looked on iNaturalist, and I actually did like, I think it was like 1 week of work. I collected all of the sightings, wrote down every location they were like found, and then I did go to every location looking for weather data and rain data and stuff like that, and then combine it together. And then at the end, I had okay, the temperature with all of the sightings were like 26 degrees when we combine everything together. And
Uh-huh.
that was something I was doing, and also like with food and stuff like that. I looked like for similar, uh, like for example, Acanthosaura is pretty similar to them in the way of living.
Hmm.
So I looked for that, and also I connected with keepers. I have like 4 other persons that keep them as well, and also connected with them. But at the end of the day, you have to experiment. So you have to see the animal yourself. You need to check every day. Oh, how is it looking? Oh, okay, maybe something is wrong. Or I think you have to watch for it, and
Yeah.
Right.
observe the
Or
animal. Yeah, and I think it's also much more easy when you have like a small collection. Imagine
mhm.
having like 100 animals, and you have 1 or 2 species that are like super rare, and you don't have the time to really observe them. So I think you have to get a little bit of a feeling how the animal should look like, and then yeah, experiment. I think that's
Mhm.
that's that's important. It
Uh,
also can like be careful, dangerous for the animal when you do stuff completely wrong. You don't have to like make crazy experiments, but like yeah, maybe change a little bit the temperature, humidity, wind, stuff like that. Yeah.
I like
Or
what you
even
added. Oh, go ahead,
yeah,
Jonas.
no, go ahead, Stefan. I have
Yeah.
something to add there, but yeah, go ahead.
I like what you said there because this is what I wanted to say, that people needed to look at their animals. You create like this baseline and you think, okay, this is this. And you do
Yeah.
this like well-educated guess, and then you just gotta observe your animals constantly and
Mm,
be not afraid. And honestly, I think the animals we keep can handle more than we think.
yeah.
They are
Yeah.
a healthy animal. Of course, that's the most important thing. A healthy animal is these animals are very successful in what they are doing. So if you create something that's similar to their environment and you make sure that there is space within the setup for them to choose. So if you get something new, place them preferably in a little bit bigger setup so they can
Mm,
actually choose what's happening in there. Then you just gotta observe and adjust from there if needed.
Right. And I
Yeah.
think an interesting point is that you have to exercise a little bit of empathy. Like uh
mm-hmm.
like what if I would be that lizard? You know what I mean?
Mm.
So
Yeah.
why is it behaving that way? For example, if you're lizards, and I'm talking about lizards because that's pretty much all I have experience with. I used to keep some like regular turtles, but not nothing super rare. But for example, if the lizard always likes to hang out in that one cork tube,
Mm-hmm.
that could be because it likes to likes to hide, you know or it just likes the temperature gradient there. So it could be
Mm-hmm.
two things, right? Maybe it's high up in that core tube that you placed there because it wants more shelter, or because that spot in the terrarium has the right temperature. So then you got to start experimenting. Maybe if I place another cork tube on the at the same height in the cool end of the terrarium, will it hang out there as well?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe it does. Or like then you can change the parameters a little bit, like use it like a lab setting, where you
Yeah.
change a little bit of the parameters to get your results at the end, or like a good idea of what's going on. Yeah,
Yeah, that's true.
yeah.
That's interesting.
That's
Yeah.
that.
It's also done by just looking and using the experience you've built, and just indeed just look at the animals and see their behavior and not see it and for oh, they're sitting in this tube. And
Yeah.
for a lot of people it stops there, so you gotta think further than that
Right.
indeed.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. For a lot of people, it stops there. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. Or what I noticed in some animals, or it's like a topic that has been discussed before with, I think, leopard geckos, is the term cryptic basking. You know what
Mm-hmm.
that is? And
Yeah.
that's really interesting because I see that in my Abronia as well. So sometimes they will bask openly on a branch and they will flatten themselves out a little bit to get more sunlight. But sometimes they like to like just stick their head out the cork tube and get some sun that way, or hide behind the tillandsia and just get some indirect sun, you know. So if you don't provide it, you would never know that they actually like that, you know. So yeah,
Yeah,
you have to
it's
provide it.
true.
So yeah, but cryptic basking, for example, is something that you have to create in the tank. Like you have to create these opportunities for these animals to do that. Because if all the hides are in the cool end and then the basking spot is on one end just blasting on a rock, then the animal is always going to be scared when it wants to warm up, you know. Like, but if you put something on top of that rock where it can kind of hide underneath, then yeah, then you will see the behavior actually change, and it will
Mhm.
start basking a lot more,
Yeah,
you know.
that's why it's also super important to have like well-structured enclosures, right? Like
Ooh,
it's
yeah.
like otherwise the animal. I mean, when there's like a branch, a water bowl, and a hide. Okay, what do you expect? There's like
Yeah, yeah.
the animal can't really live out their natural behaviors because everything they do is like also in an open space, and yeah, it's like it's not good.
They live in panic mode all the time
Yeah.
then because they cannot really be secure, you know. There's no leaves to hide away from, and they
Mhm.
always feel seen, you know. They will always have this
Mhm.
flight instinct, and that's why they maybe dig underneath the water bowl, and you think like,
Yeah.
oh, this is an animal that's not supposed to dig, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe my animal is special, but yeah, no, it's just scared, you know. It's
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
a hot, you know. Yeah.
That's
And it's
also.
also like, yeah, sorry. Go.
Go ahead, Flo.
Yeah, that's why I also don't like the glass terrariums where like only where you don't have like a background or back wall or something, and every side is open. Like imagine being like in a glass box, and from every side
Yeah,
everybody
yeah, yeah.
can watch. If fuck, it would like, of course, this animal is stressed out. Like it's natural, right?
Yeah.
Definitely. And there's many more things to say about that because I don't like full glass tanks at all anymore because
Hmm.
they're just too heavy. And who needs like a glass floor? You're
Yeah,
never gonna
Yeah.
see through the glass floor. You know what I mean?
uh,
It's just additional weight for me, at least. And a good example would be like the screen cages that I use for the Abronia. They are
mhm,
like 45 by 45 by 90 or like 50 by 50 by 100. I have one bigger cage, but yeah, you can always go a bit larger, but that's like the minimum, you know, and what you would regularly use for them. And they are so easy to assemble and to build, you know. They come in like a package, and you can, when you're a little bit skilled, you can install them in like, I don't know, 20 minutes or something. And then you have a
mhm,
cage that you can actually carry around. 50
mhm.
by 50 by 100. You can carry it from A to B. I don't know, Stefan, you have some aquariums, right? So what's the
Yeah.
largest aquarium size, full glass, that you feel comfortable to handle, to carry by yourself from to
By
another
my
room, for
okay,
example?
I've carried like I've been really done with carrying stuff, because I'm on my own also a lot. So I do crazy stuff and my bag that it's still here. But yeah, I think 120 by 60, and then it's like, and that's heavy because
But
square
these are
meter.
6 millimeter, right?
Yeah, 6 or 8.
Yeah, yeah,
So
or
they're
8, yeah.
incredibly heavy, and that's actually I really like that you started about this also. Just to
Mhm.
get back with the decoration, think that is also the reason that people say this animal will die in a big setup. It is not
Mhm.
because it's a big setup. It is because we have this huge open space where this
Yeah.
animal is constantly in like panic mode, just looking around if
Mhm.
there's a predator. But that's really cool that you bring this up because I'm thinking about switching over to the Euro boxer, the hour boxer, for a lot
Mhm.
of my turtles.
Uh-huh.
So
Okay.
stop with the aquarium and get
Okay.
this plastic boxes. But
Mm.
the only reason I'm doubting about doing this is that my animals only have one place that they can see further than the walls of what's
Mhm.
like, uh, uh, yeah. around them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm doubting which is better. Is it better to see through the glass and to want to go somewhere endlessly without being able to go there? So to see a world and know you're never gonna actually visit that world? Or is it better to know where your walls are and just look up, and then once in a while there's like this hand that throws in food, or this big eyes, like almost like God, like looking over from the sky, and that's it. But you don't have those transparent walls with where you can't get to. I wonder what's better. It's something I'm currently almost struggling with.
Okay. So where I'm at, from my mindset, I think the tops are better that are not made out of glass. Because look at the what's it? Look at all the, oh man, I missed the word. The benefits, yeah, there will never be a leakage, right? An aquarium can leak at any point. And these plastic tops, they actually cannot leak, and you can have something stacked up in the corner for whenever you need them. They're easy to clean, I think. An aquarium, for me, it's like, I understand the idea. It's beautiful to look at from all sides, but I doubt it's better for the animals, and it comes with like some risks, I think, actually, because like yeah, that's part of why I don't have really many aquariums anymore, because I'm always scared, like, oh man, if this thing is gonna leak, man, this is gonna be terrible. You know what I mean? And with tubs, you're pretty much safe, right? It cannot happen. From my understanding, there can't be a leak, right?
No, you have to drop something, or
yeah, but they're pretty sturdy, right? They're made to hold these big bodies of water. So and when you say like, okay, they can't look through the glass and swim endlessly, I think that's a good thing. So it's like a little pond that they have. And maybe I would like build something on top of it where they can kind of look out. So the world doesn't just stop where the pond walls are, but they can kind of look out and see their environment. Maybe build like a little terrarium on top of that and make a basking area, something like that, So I think that's the perfect solution. If you ask me, I think that's better, to be honest.
It's honestly, it's the only doubt I have on switching over, and I want to start trying. And one of the reasons is indeed, if it drops, it's not glass everywhere. It's a lot less heavy, so I'm able to get the wrecks from the wall and clean better. It's easier to put in drains, easier to clean, and also a tub of 80 by 60 centimeters is 45 euros. Aquarium of 80 by 60 euros is 175, 200 euros, because they are all custom made for me. So that's also a reason for me why I was doubting on that point. So what would you do, Flo?
Wow, that's tough, man. That's really tough. Like, I see the benefits from like the top, but like, I try to imagine being like the turtle. Well, what would I think it's better? Yeah, I think as Jonas said, it's like the best solution would be to use the tubs, but like create a space where they can look out. I think that's like the best. Otherwise, I think when they're only in the tubs, it's like, it's also a little bit sad, when you only have like black walls, and maybe they are even like, after a longer time, they are more scared because only thing is coming from above. You know what I mean?
That's something that I wanted to say. Yeah. If it's like a very small top, and sometimes it opens up and then there's this hand or something, that's maybe something that I would be that I would watch the behavior, that they don't get scared, but other than that, I think when they're in a pond, there's like a natural wall or a natural end to their little pond, so I don't see a problem, actually.
I'm sorry, do you hear me like stutter now when I thought? So a bit of a technical difficulty, but we are back. And you guys talked about something you really wanted to discuss during this podcast. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think we're taking now a really hard turn. And like, so last time I visited Jonas, actually the first time, And yeah, we talked a lot about feeder insects and especially gut loading. And I know Jonas loves this topic and really loves to gut load his animals. He's very, I've never seen someone so fucking dedicated to feeding his insects. For real. It was crazy. And I think that's a pretty cool and interesting topic to get into because it's super important for the animals and it's also super interesting. And I know that Jonas have like a little bit of knowledge about it, make it like very interesting. And yeah, so maybe you can just start like what do you have as feeder insects and what do you feed them? And yeah, just tell us, man.
I do actually think about this topic a lot, and as I said previously, at first I was not much into insects, but then you have more and more lizards, and of course you got to deal with the feeder insect, and then I kind of like started to like them. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
having an isopod colony, another isopod colony, a roach colony, like all this stuff, and then you read about like all the nutritional contents of the different feeder insects. So basically, when we keep insectivorous animals, there's three ways where we can ensure our animals get like a variety of nutrients that they need, right? So the first one is just variety of different feeder insects, right? That's the most basic one that many people
Mhm.
have a basic understanding of. Like you gotta offer variety. You gotta offer this one feeding and something else the next feeding and something like this. So variety of different feeder insects. Then we have the dusting, right? So we
Mhm.
dust with calcium powder, with multivitamin powder. And the third thing is the gut loading. So we watch what our feeder insects will eat. And then the content of the gut will still be in the insect once the lizard grabs it and eats it. That's the whole idea behind it. Now, I'm not exactly sure how far this whole gut loading goes, like, but I can that's just my feeling about it. Like if you have for example um like a colony of if you breed grasshoppers or whatever feeder insect really, if you raise it from like a little baby all the way up to an adult and then you feed it to your
Mhm.
animals, right, until it got the right size, and they always were provided with like the proper vegetables and stuff, and then I think it probably has like a better nutritional content than stuff you just get from the store.
Mhm.
Because what is the what are the feeder insects you get from the pet store? They're made to like mass produce, right? So they get stuff with like these I'm sure like cheap food actually, so you can mass
Mhm.
produce them. It wouldn't be economically good for the breeders of these feeder insects to give them like the highest quality of food in terms of vitamins and stuff,
Mhm.
but it makes much more sense in an economic way that to give them like the cheapest food that yields the best results, right? In terms of growth rates, you know? But we want to do that a little bit differently, so we try to gut load our feeder insects with like the good stuff, the proper vegetables and fruits, and of course, like also herbs and greens.
Mhm.
So that's like, yeah, the basic philosophy behind it. We have these three different ways where we can ensure our animals get their nutrients. And with the gut loading, I think it really depends on what kind of feeder insect you're dealing with. For example, what do we have? We have the crickets, the roaches, mealworms, and when I say mealworms, I also mean buffalo worms and superworms because they're kind of the same. Just yeah, they're just different sizes, I would say.
Yeah.
They're kind of the same. And what else? And then we have the grasshoppers and the waxworms, right? So um, there are differences as to what they will eat or how you take care of them, right? So for example, how do I approach this? So the roaches, they will pretty much eat anything, but they have their preferences. So they really like
Mhm.
fruits and veggies, right? But they will not touch too many greens when I feed them. You know, when I put in leaves and stuff like that, they will probably they're not really interested in that. But if I put in apples and carrots, they will just go crazy over it. So you have to consider that, like, what do the feeder insects actually like? Like, I can try to get my dubia roaches to eat kale leaves, but eventually they probably will, but they will not like it, and they will probably not really reproduce the best, right?
Mm.
On the other hand, then you have, for example, the grasshoppers, the locusts. And if I feed them with apples, they will die because it's
Mm-hmm.
way too high in sugar and way too much moisture. They will pretty much only eat, greenery, right? Like dandelion greens, stinging nettle, and like all kind of stuff. Just because for what they are, that's what they do. That's what a grasshopper does: eat green leaves, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And a roach is very different. They're like the tridivores and eat like rotten fruit or whatever is rotting on the ground, essentially, right? Um, and the crickets, they will eat pretty much. Yeah, they have their preferences as well, but they will eat pretty much everything. So one thing I do with the crickets, for example, so I try to kind of force them to eat good stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
We all know the little cricket boxes that you can get at the pet store.
Mm-hmm.
So what's in there? You have this egg carton, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then on the ground, to provide them with like some basic stuff that they can eat. There's like what's in there? Wheat bran, I think,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
or sometimes even dried dog food or something. Like, what's in there in these cricket boxes? Like, it's like
Uh,
pellets or something,
yeah, these
right?
small pellets that are mostly yeast actually, and there's some I believe some protein in there, but it's certainly not a lot, and also no moisture. So that's the reason if people feed their crickets and they mist, then all your crickets will run
Mm-hmm.
through the water bowl because they are dehydrated as can be. So yeah, it's not really, it's there to keep them alive a bit longer, but certainly not to enhance the nutrients of your cricket.
Exactly. And the
Mm-hmm.
first thing I do when I buy a box of crickets, they're not my favorite feeder insect, but sometimes I buy a box of crickets, and the first thing I do, they will move to a bigger box. And on the ground, I have sand. I have like dry bird sand, that you can use for the birds. There's a little bit of calcium in there and stuff. And then I put like this is a bit fancy. You don't have to do that. You could use egg carton, but I don't want any mold. So
Mm-hmm.
when I put like something like some vegetables in there, I don't want anything to mold. So I put in like pieces of bark. It could be cork bark or like a broken terracotta pot. I put like these pieces there so the crickets can hide, but everything is kind of dry. It's actually really dry. But what I
Mm-hmm.
do is I always provide fresh food, like full of moisture and stuff that they can eat. So they're actually forced to eat the good stuff. They cannot even chew on the egg carton and have that in their system, or chew on the pellets and have that in their system. They have the choice between dry bark and whatever I offer them with fresh vegetables. So they will eat much more vegetables. If you take the cricket box from the store and throw an apple in there, yeah, they will eat some of it, but then the next day they will chew on the pellets again.
Mm-hmm.
And the next day after that, there will be mold all over the thing because there's so much protein in these pellets. And then you throw in like a very moist piece of apple, then there's going to be mold, which you don't want as well. So I provide them with like a little bigger box with dry sand, and then like these places to hide, whatever you
Mm-hmm.
use. And then I throw in, oh man, another thing that I do is like I also use dried herbs from the rodent section of the pet store.
Mm-hmm.
So you can buy dried dandelion, dried stinging nettle and stuff like that, or dried flowers and stuff. So I think you can get those for tortoises and bearded dragons as well. But if you go to the rodent section, it's much cheaper. So for some reason, so they always try to rip off the reptile keepers. I feel like.
For
Yeah, for
sure.
real. So
For
um,
sure.
yeah, they do. So I use that. So I provide like one corner where I put like dried stinging nettle, and then one corner where they have like their vegetables. And I talked about this before. I think carotenoids are really important. So I feed lots of carrots, but Apparently, there are foods that are even higher in carotenoids than the carrot. Flo, you've seen it. I sometimes use algae powder.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
saw
went a little
it.
bit crazy when you were at my place, but yeah.
It was like, I don't even know how much it was. It was like so much. It was like he was like giving away like free candy or something. But it
No,
was so.
I went a little bit overboard. So what I do, some people use spirulina, right? But I cannot stand the smell of it. I'm sure it's a good supplement, but I don't like the smell of it. And I even tried it in my own smoothie, and I really don't like it. So there's another algae powder, the chlorella algae, and it just smells like green grass, essentially. It
Mhm.
smells really good, very high in protein and all sorts of other vitamins and minerals. And it's like the food that is the richest in chlorophyll, I think. So it's like green superfood essentially. And because it's so high in protein, that's pretty much for many of my feeder insects is the only protein source that I will regularly use. So
Mhm.
at some point, if they only eat vegetables, they will be hungry for protein, of course. And then I offer the not the spirulina, the chlorella algae powder, and then they will eat that, and then I can ensure they have that in their system. And yeah, that's something I do. And then just a variety of vegetables. And I'm a little bit biased. Like I like to use what I like in my kitchen as well. So I don't buy too much fancy stuff that I will never touch, that I just buy for the animals. But I myself like to eat carrots. I like to eat zucchini, for example. I like to eat mangoes, and then I use that, and then I research it beforehand, what the nutritional content of it is, and I'm like, okay, I'm pretty good there. So yeah.
Mhm.
One thing you have to look out for is like not always feed like fruits because they can be too high in sugar, I think.
Yeah.
And so I do that for the crickets and the roaches, what I just described, basically vegetables, dried herbs, and fruits, you know? Again, for the grasshoppers, I do it a bit differently. I do the same setup. Um, dry sand, climbing opportunities because they really like to jump and climb. And I just throw in greens, whatever I can find. Like now in summertime, it's great because you can just pick stuff and throw it in there. Always have one corner where I have the dried stuff so they can eat that because sometimes I think they want to chew on the dry herbs instead of the
Mhm.
moisture. I don't know why, but they can choose. And yeah, that's what I do for them. Again, they would probably die if I feed too many fruits because it's way too because they come from like very dry regions and then they have this boom cycle where they just all hatch at the same time and eat whatever greens they can find, essentially, right? So yeah, I provide them with different greens. And then of course you could research what this herb has as far as calcium content or as far as vitamin A. Um, I think as long as they have like green stuff in their system, it's pretty good. That's
Mhm.
that's my philosophy behind it. Of course, I like to vary it a little bit, but that's my philosophy behind the grasshoppers. And then I use the grasshoppers intentionally to give like a feeder insect that's packed with greens, because they never ate anything else in their time with me, basically. So yeah, and then when I want to do something, maybe I offer a cricket the next time that had like I don't know, zucchini and bee pollen, for example, stuff that the grasshoppers wouldn't really like probably, but the crickets
Mhm.
love it, and then they have like a different nutrient profile just because of what I fed them. Yeah. That's basically my philosophy behind it. You could get really scientific, and then um, another thing that you always have to consider with feeder insects is the phosphorus to calcium ratio.
Yeah.
You guys heard about that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what we usually do with dusting, right? So we calcium dust our feeder insects because many feeder insects are quite poor when it comes to the calcium ratio actually. So yeah, what can you do? You can dust the animals with dubia roaches and grasshoppers, I never dust them because I don't think there's any need to. I think they're quite nutritious by themselves. I don't know exactly the phosphorus to calcium ratio with them, but I don't really care, to be honest, because whenever I feed crickets, they will always be dusted. That's my philosophy behind it, you know. I like to, when I feed crickets, because they jump, I like to inhibit their movement a little bit, so I will naturally dust them. And also what I do is not many people do that, but I think it's great, and pretty much all my animals do like it as a feeder insect, is isopods, you know? And isopods have like a great calcium profile because they're not technically insects, they're like land shrimp,
Yeah.
you know? And they don't have I'm not exactly sure, but they don't have like a chitin outer exoskeleton, but their outer shell or whatever, or exoskeleton, is mostly made out of calcium. So when you have an animal that eats insects, I would say try offer isopods every now and then. And another thing, again, this is just a theory, it's not really set in stone or scientifically backed up, but every isopod keeper knows when you have a crash in the colony, right? When all your isopods die at one point, you know? I mean, it hasn't happened to me in years, unfortunately, actually, but I know what it feels like, and I also know what it smells like when you open that box. It smells like shrimp or fish or whatever, you know? It doesn't smell like a land creature. It smells more like seafood or something, you know? So I'm suspecting actually they have like a different omega-3 profile, maybe. I don't know if that makes any sense. It's just my suspicion. So because there are kind of like shrimp, maybe they have like more omega-3 fatty acids. And
Sure.
I think that's a good thing as well to offer to your animals every now and then, because omega-3, I think we all know, is quite healthy. So and you can also see like the difference of chickens that are raised on traditional chicken food, whatever they eat, and chickens that are raised on a pasture. They can eat greens all day. They have much more omega-3s, and it's said to be healthier. So yeah, I think offering isopods every now and then is another thing that I do. And yeah, that's it.
So, did all of this get started with the isopod, like looking into different feeders, or was it because the way you approach your hobby shifted a bit, and it was just another element? And of course, you have your Abronia, which we know have certain needs when it comes to nutrients, and if they're not met, you can see it in their color and the way they breed. So,
Mhm.
has this gone hand in hand, or did the isopod started? How did this all get started for you?
Right. So I think first it started with the isopods. I just had them as like a feeder insect that's very easy to breed. And then I got more and more of them, and I got some ornamental species that I'm not planning on feeding. So I got more into isopods. And of course, I started to research like how good are they as a feeder, you know? And then I had to dig really deep to find articles because everyone said, "Oh, they're high in calcium. Yeah, they're." And then I have found one scientific article where it said they have a calcium to phosphorus ratio of 12 to 1,
Wow.
which is pretty impressive, right?
Yeah.
So usually I think crickets have like uh they have like calcium to phosphorus of 1 to 7, maybe.
Yeah, depending on the species, 1 to 7 to 1 to 15, I believe. It's
Yeah, yeah,
pretty.
yeah. Right about that, but actually a very poor ratio. The dubia roaches are a bit better. They have like 1 to 3 or 1 to 2. Like they have a bit more calcium, I think. Um, but yeah, most feeder insects, mealworms, crickets, they have like a very poor ratio. And then on the other hand, you see the isopods with like 12 to 1, like they have lots of calcium. So I think that's a natural way to provide a calcium source. And then again, probably like a very different nutrient profile when it comes to fatty acids and stuff. So, and also when we think about gut loading, I mean, this is such a broad topic. We all always just think about vitamins, right? or vitamins and calcium, and but there's so much else, like fiber maybe important as well, and then different acids maybe, or what's the opposite of an acid? I can't think of the English word
Opposite
now.
of acid, I don't know. You have aminos, which are of
No,
course
on the
building
opposite
blocks for your
spectrum of the
protein.
pH. If something is
Yeah. You have acidic and alkalinic.
alkaline, yeah. That's
Yeah.
it. Yeah. So maybe that's important as well, you know, a certain alkalinity in certain feeders, or for example, the isopods mainly they eat leaves, and the leaves contain, you know this, Stefan, when you do like blackwater aquariums, right? The leaves
Mm.
contain humic acids and
Mm.
tannins and stuff that actually have like you know, some sort of healing properties for the fish, you know, but they will be in the insects at least to a small degree, right? When they eat the dry leaves and stuff. So yeah,
Yeah.
again, I think um variety is key when it comes to that, and also like doing a little bit of research what each feeder insect can provide and what it can't, you know. Mealworms are not the best, but I think they have a place, for example, right?
I like the
They
mealworms for the fibers. So not necessarily for their nutrient content, but for the fibers actually. So that's a good reason
exactly
they're
right,
still yeah.
or to get a skinny animal to fatten up a little bit, you know, that's
Yeah.
also a possibility with that. And yeah, it has fibers. It has a bit more magnesium than the other feeders, I think. A mealworm, funny enough, they have like a higher magnesium content than other feeders, and at least from what I see. The thing is, when you want to research that, you go on the internet and you find like so many different informations, you know. It's like this lab tested this and this lab tested that. I actually, what I would love to do is like take a sample insect from, for example, my roach colony or my isopod colonies, and then a grasshopper that I gut loaded the way I do, and take it to a lab. They freeze dry it, they grind it into a powder, and then they give me the nutrient analysis. That would be awesome. I don't
That
know
would
if
be
that's
dope.
possible, but technically it should be, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, more and more insects are being used for dog food. There are dog foods now based on insect powder. Of course, there's for humans, there's powders based on just the same as with pea protein. There's also insect protein you can buy. So I think that should be possible. I really like how deep you got into this. But I can imagine for somebody who wants to start off with this or hears this as like, yeah, sounds good, that might be a bit overwhelming. So for somebody who's thinking about increasing the nutrient content of their foods or the variety, you mentioned you didn't like cricket. So what are for you like your base variety of insects? Where can somebody start, and how would you suggest they approach that?
Okay, yeah, I totally get your point that maybe it's like too much info for a newbie that just and that's the thing, like most people go to the pet store and buy a box of crickets or buy some mealworms, and then they think they're good. And in many ways, yeah, it can work for a long time, you know, but to answer your question, where to start, I think when you compare the different feeders, I think roaches do pretty well when it comes to their nutrient profile. So I think roaches are a good place to start. Of course, many people are going to be grossed out by the sheer thought of keeping roaches in the house. But I can assure you that a dubia roach is actually like, I think they're kind of cute now. At first, I was a bit grossed out, but now they grew they grew on me. They're just like big isopods, kind of. You know, it's really cool. So if you don't like to have them in your house constantly, then just get them every now and then from the pet store, and that's, I think, a good way to start. Also, when people feed roaches, don't just throw them in the tank. Don't do that. What I like to do is, of course, tongue feeding. You know, we have a guest appearance there. What I like to do is tongue feeding, right? So I can actually check if every animal that I want to eat is eating. or also cup feeding. I think, I don't
Mm.
know, it's not innovative or anything, but I really like it that you have like a small cup. For example, this is going to look different for the Spherodactylus than for the Abronia, right? For the Abronia is going to be a bigger cup, for the Spherodactylus like a very small one, and then you can offer a variety of like, yeah, throw 4 isopods in there, 4 little buffalo worms, and a couple of like tiny roaches, and then the animals can pick and choose maybe. So, but again, to answer your question, if somebody is completely new to this, they should probably start with offering a variety of insects. That's probably the first thing I would tell them. Just
Mm.
crickets and or just mealworms is not great, I believe. If you combine the two, that's better than nothing. But I would also add in isopods if you can, because
Mm.
they come in different sizes actually. Like you have the very small ones, the white dwarf white isopods, and you have quite large ones that are easy to breed. So I think yeah, even up to bearded dragon size, you can I know people that have bearded dragons that feed them isopods and it works really well. So I think up to that size, if the animal will eat insects, you should have an isopod colony. There's no way around
Mm.
it. Like it doesn't take much space. It literally doesn't take any heat or electricity. Just have this little box standing around somewhere. Throw throw some leaf litter in there. You can do your research how to keep isopods, but I think it's a great way to enhance your hobby a little bit, you know? And
Mm.
maybe at some point, if your pet store is out of crickets or whatever, for whatever reason, you can't get food right away when you need it, you always have something to fall back on, right?
Mm.
And I think that's a great way to start. That's how it started for me, with breeding my own insects actually, and then you can start to look into mixed species insect breeding. So
Mm.
I have a big box where I breed the dubias, and it's a bit different than most people would think. No egg cartons, it's just a big deep layer of soil and lots of bark again, like it looks like the forest floor essentially.
Mm.
And I throw in leaf litter. I throw all kinds of stuff in there, and whatever vegetable scraps I have, I throw in there. So it's almost like a compost bin in a way. And I also have isopods in there, and I also have flower beetles in there. The
Mm.
Pachnoda, I don't know if you
Yeah.
know them.
Yeah.
Yeah, the flower beetle, and they all reproduce like crazy. So with the flower beetles, it was just a crazy experiment. A friend of mine had this cool species and he gave me like 6 beetles and like, yeah, see what you can do with them. And I threw them in the box and they breed like crazy after a while. And just
Nice.
last week I sold like 50 of them. Like I don't even
Wow.
feed
Damn.
the beetles.
Wow. What?
They're just there, you know, and they just, yeah. And sometimes when I would dig in the soil, I find little larvae, and sometimes the Abronia get one of this, but it's not the main feeder insect. It's just something cool to have, and like, yeah, they turn my vegetable scraps into money, if you will, you know, because some people are interested in them. So
Yeah, of course.
yeah, and they
Did
save
you?
me like yeah, all the dubia roaches in there. They saved me like the bill that I would have to pay for if I would buy every feeder insect, you know.
Mm. For
Yeah.
the
So yeah.
sorry for the beetles, you don't feed them because like the animals don't take them, or is there like a
Yeah.
specific thing
So
behind that?
they have like these very beautiful bright colors, which
Mm.
for us they are beautiful, but in nature it usually usually signals, hey, I'm
Mm.
dangerous, like don't eat me. You know what I mean? Like dart frogs, for example. So and they have a distinct smell to them. It's not
Mm-hmm.
as bad as like superworm beetles or something because they smell terrible.
Yeah,
I had
fuck yeah.
superworm beetles in there as well, and they took over the whole thing. They bred like crazy,
Yeah.
and I had to get rid of them. Yeah, but they, you know what, man? I never. Maybe my Abronia would take them, but I never
Mm-hmm.
actually tried to be honest. And yeah,
The thing
it's
is, sorry, I don't want to cut you off.
no. It's
Okay,
okay.
so because I also thought like, maybe it's not like a good feeder, but I actually saw a post where someone fed his Polychrus these beetles. And what I
For real.
also noted, yeah, and what I also noticed with like the Enyaloides, the male, especially, he likes to eat the buffalo beetles.
When you say buffalo beetles, you mean the large
Yeah,
ones,
the
the
big ones.
phobos, yeah, the
Yeah,
mobile,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
phoba. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So the buffaloes
And
are very tiny. They're even
yeah,
smaller
no,
than
sorry,
mealworms.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
No, no, no.
the big ones. Yeah, yeah. And I find it
Ah,
also
but
very interesting because like they smell like wow,
mm,
disgusting. But
it's
maybe they have like maybe the disgusting smells, maybe something is in there that they need. You know what I mean?
I
Maybe
thought
for
about this as well. I thought
yeah,
about this as
right?
well because in the wild, for example, a Baronia will eat scorpions, for example.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, maybe there's something to it that they kind of they can
Yeah, get from
suggest
it,
maybe
yeah.
some alkaloids or whatever compounds that's actually beneficial to them. We don't
Hmm.
know. I
Yeah,
could
of course.
be.
And also like when I think about like I always think about what different feeder insects can you feed, and what's like a big part that we are missing in the hobby is like spiders, for example,
Ooh,
because it's
yeah.
like in nature it's like such a big food source. I talked about it with Hannes, the spinner, and I was like, yeah, damn, why not? I mean, some spiders are easy to breed and you can feed them off, and maybe they also have like benefits that we don't even know exist, you know? And also, I sometimes, not now anymore, but I had like butterflies, for example, because the
Mm.
Corytophanes ate in nature, like also butterflies. I mean, they have like almost zero nutrients, you know, it's like only wings and stuff, but maybe it's like an enrichment insect, you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
For example, flying insects is something that
Yeah.
we usually don't really offer. And the only thing that I can think of course, you can buy like the regular flies, or
Mm,
turf flies or whatever, like the regular flies with like
yeah.
tiny wings that can't really fly. But for example, for anoles, right?
Yeah.
You would want something that flies. The thing is that you can do is soldier flies.
Hmm.
So there's soldier fly larvae, and they had like a little hype, I think, when they first were introduced to the hobby, because they're also very high in calcium. That's one other feeder insect that has a very high
Mm,
calcium profile. But I found that when I fed soldier fly larvae, sometimes they would go undigested, you know?
hmm.
They would just be pooped out and undigested, and they have like a rough outer skeleton or whatever, or outer shell. And I thought like, okay, my animal had no benefit from that. It ate
Mm.
it. It was had a full stomach, but was not able to digest it. So why would I feed this? You know.
Yeah.
So some people feed them, and it seems to be working. But for me, it was not. For me, what was way more interesting when they turned into flies, because the flies are very easy to handle. Like when
Mm.
they fly, you can just grab them out of the air. Essentially, they're
Yeah.
very slow flyers. They're very easy to handle, and
Yeah.
I think it makes sense to have this specific insect for that purpose. So you can offer a
Hmm.
flying insect, for example.
Yeah, that's true. Maybe I can ask you a question. So that's interesting. So, what do you think? So, what feeder insects would you like to maybe feed one day or see in the hobby? So, for example, for me, I would really love to feed cicadas. I know
Ooh.
it's like almost impossible because like of the long breeding cycle, but I think it's also insect that is eaten a lot in the wild. And there are
Right.
like so many different things. Maybe Jonas or Stefan, you have like an insect that you would like to feed or see as a feeder.
Mm, for me, I said this before. I looked at different butterfly species that
Hmm.
have, for me at least, the potential that could make good feeder insects for like small species, and even the caterpillars, you know. That would be something that would be really, really interesting. But With the cicadas, it's like, aren't they also very loud?
Yeah, of course.
I liked how you asked that question, Flo, because I had the same question. You know, first off, we had the question of um, is for a beginner, but then I was like, okay,
Yeah,
what's going to be like the step forward? So, for
yeah,
instance, my dream is to one day breed a whole bunch of feeder insects that are found in the same region as my
yes.
animals,
Mm-hmm.
because all my animals are all Asian. So for your dubia, for you, Jonas, dubia is a bit more, in the same range. For you too, Flo. So, but I
Mm-hmm.
would love to have only Asian isopods, only Asian phasmids, only Asian grasshoppers, and breed them to actually feed them with food items that are naturally found in their range. So my question, indeed, to you was, Jonas, like, what if you had the time, because it does take up some more time. If you had the time or the possibilities, what would be your next step in this process?
Yeah, definitely some type of butterfly, I think, because
Mm.
if you look around, um, the feeder insects that we have in the hobby, they represent like a good range of insects that we find in the wild. We have beetles, we have beetle larvae, we have crickets, grasshoppers, roaches. But as you said, like what's actually missing is like the spiders and the butterflies,
Mm.
and many animals, many reptiles will eat pretty much just that, So it's like we try to replicate it with how we can do it, but maybe it's better to just feed spiders and butterflies and
Yeah.
caterpillars. But I think with this conversation, we also have to look at what's possible or what's feasible, Is it really like commercially um possible to mass produce some type of spider? Because it always has to, because they're predators, you always have to breed something that the spider eats, and then you
Mm.
have to like different steps where it's I understand, but maybe with this you could just, I don't know, what's it called? Field sweep every now and then in the summer,
Yeah, that's
grab a
true.
cool spider, make sure it's not a protected species, and
Yeah, true.
throw
But
it
for
in.
example, something like this would be cool for me because like I only have this one species and now I can dive like really into the feeders. You know what I mean? That's maybe
Yeah.
for people that have like a smaller collection and want to focus on different things. And I think there's potential in that as well because I think even though only when you feed it maybe once, twice a year, it's like when you feed like for example stick insect, it's also getting more popular or stuff like that. It's like a different feeling, and also the animals behave differently when you feed it. Also, like with praying mantises or something like that. Like Roy said in like one episode, the polychrus will attack like the pinchers from the praying mantis, and they know exactly how to manage to kill the thing without getting hurt. And I think that's also like pretty important for the animal's well-being to get stimulated in the head. Oh, no, I
Mm,
don't get like every day another cricket. Now I get like a praying mantis. Fuck, I need to uh, check it out.
step
How
my game
to
up.
yeah, maybe step it up and yeah, be more aware and don't be lazy.
Do
Right,
you
right.
feel like the average keeper, not somebody who is doing this full time or is like trying to expand a certain collection for genetic reasons or whatever, commercial reasons. Do you think that your average keeper should um, account for some time spent, some time that they are spending on the animal care should include care for actually the feeders? Because I think one of the reasons a lot of people won't breed rodents or won't breed their own insects is because less time is being you're not able to spend as much time as you want on your animals. But on the other hand, if you allocate a bit more to gut loading and variety, then the welfare of your animals will probably improve. So do you think somebody needs to take this in account, this extra time?
Sure, maybe. But then again, I think I would more agree with the last point you made, that if you put the time in, then it will in the end benefit your reptiles, you know. And it's also like fun, you know, having isopod colonies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's just fun. Like some people keep ornamental isopods and roaches just because they like it, and just there's a huge invert scene, you know, that people just keep inverts, you know, just because they think it's cool. And if we get a little taste of that by having our feeder colony insects, then yeah, I just see yeah, I just see the pros actually. So it's like I wouldn't say the little time that I spend on the feeder colonies actually take away from the care for my animals. I wouldn't say that. I would say it's just much more beneficial, because then again you see the whole cycle, you know, of life, if you will, right? You know exactly how the animal the insect is living its life, you know, and what ecological role it fulfills, you know, whether it's eating dead leaves or whatever, detritus or greenery from the trees. And then yeah, then you feed it to your lizard, and all of a sudden it's like you know what I mean? It's like you see the whole picture in a
Yeah, the
way.
full cycle.
You don't just get like crickets from the store, feed them off, and have no connection to them. It's like you kind of build a connection with the feeder insects as well. It sounds
Yeah,
crazy, but that's what I look. That's how I look at it. You know?
yeah. It's like
Yeah,
I really enjoy to feed like the feeder insects, you know. I was like,
dude, it's
oh
so calming
damn.
for some
Yeah,
reason. Yeah,
right. Now you're cutting up some vegetables and greens and then put the box down, throw it in, listen to them munching on it. Yeah, it's
yeah.
like it's great.
They're just they're just doing what they're supposed to do. You know, they live
Yeah,
their lives. They're afraid of the light usually. You know, and
yeah,
they just come out. They smell something with the little antennas, and then oh, there's something. You know, it's it's so much fun. Why shouldn't? Yeah, I think that's everybody should do. To be
yeah,
honest.
true, yeah.
If you keep like a reptile that eats insects, you should have a little box of uh insects that you breed. I think
Yeah.
yeah, it's much more fun. You can throw in your vegetable scraps, and then you have all a better understanding of the natural cycles, I think.
Mm. Yeah, for
Just
sure, for
my
sure.
my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Great
Yeah.
message.
So, Stefan, I wanted to ask you something that you just said. Your perfect scenario would be to have all the insects from Asia and all the plants from Asia, so you could recreate that bioregion, if you will, right? And I think it's really interesting if a keeper like you really focuses on one region. But what do you think is it? Like for me, for example, it's the Caribbean and the Mexican and Central American highlands, right? So with the Spheros and the Abronia, and I used to keep a nose, so I always was drawn to that region and the biodiversity there. And you're so much drawn to Southeast Asia. And Flo, for example, he has this whole Ecuador theme going on. Like I really like when a keeper is focused on that. So what I actually want to know is like, do you think it's necessary to some degree, or is it also cool to just be completely spread, like have some arid species from here, maybe have some arid species from Mexico, some from Morocco, and then also have some tropical tanks and have some fish tanks here and keep some inverts? Like how you think there's a benefit to the care of the animals when you like specialize to a bioregion or even to certain groups of animals? Or basically, can you also be a good keeper if you like super spread and have very different animals from different parts of the world and different lifestyles?
I think you can, but it's gonna make it a whole lot harder. For
Mm.
sure. I think the specialization in a certain area will only benefit it will benefit you as a keeper, it will benefit your animals, it will benefit your understanding of a certain area, and therefore makes it easier to indeed keep some species that are found there, but maybe not directly there's so much info on. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also a good way, at least for me, because I think we all know that this hobby is so, as far as we can call it a hobby, is so incredibly diverse. And if I don't put boundaries on what I'm doing, I'm going absolutely, there's no
Crazy.
return. You if you want, you can keep going. There's also always something. So I
Yeah.
think it will benefit you as a keeper, but also your animals. And a lot of if you have one arid setup and one tropical setup all in the same room, we said this almost at the beginning of the podcast. A care sheet you have to take with a grain of salt. You have to look at your
Mm-hmm.
own situation. And then you have one room, which is one sort of controlled environment. And there's all these different microclimates in there you got to manage. And you spend a lot of time on there. And there's also, if a light breaks, whatever, it's going to impact your animals way more than if the surrounding is totally based on their natural habitat. So
Right.
yeah, I
So
think it can only benefit us and the animals.
okay. So you think there's like other benefits, like for example, if you also go the next step and try to only use plants from that area, you think that's you could use any plant that grows under that condition. So why do you choose to just use plants from Borneo, for example? So is it like just the nerdiness factor, maybe? Like, oh, that's what I'm doing. That's like my profile in the hobby. That's what I want to do, and that's why I enjoy it. Or
I think it started as a bit of nerdiness, also because I
Mm.
think it's really fun to just go in deep, like you guys do on certain topics. Also because I don't know if it's the same for you, but for me, the terrarium and aquarium hobby are go like hand in hand. I think that's the reason we still use so much glass in our hobby. And biotope setups were always my favorite. But to take it a step further, um, it's definitely, clean environment, good food, correct heating, UV, and then there's, it's not highest up in the rank, but I think it will benefit your animal because I remember that you also talked about in Flow, Roy with his
Mm.
polypus. There were some berries of a plant that is naturally
Mm.
found in the environment. Then he
Yeah.
sees his polypus eating on those berries.
That's so dope. Yeah.
So there's so many opportunities that to learn,
yeah,
and maybe there's so much in their environment that the animals naturally interact with in one way or another. So why not try to replicate it as nicely as possible, or make it as adjacent as possible, and maybe find out there's actually something happening in nature that we didn't know about.
Mm.
Because I think
right, exactly. Yeah.
for a lot of our animals, sometimes we learn more about them in captivity than we can do in field work.
Yeah.
Of course,
Sure.
yeah.
Our hobby really contributes in that, and I think by doing that, yeah, it makes it easier or better for your animal, and it's just fun. I think it's really fun, man.
Yeah, for real. It's like,
Yeah, that's what I mean with the nerdiness factor,
Yeah,
right? Because I think you can there's a certain fun in it when you say like, okay, that's what I want to do, so I go all in, you know? I don't just want the tropical setup. That's like the next step. You don't just want to keep tropical species, you want to keep tropical species from Southeast Asia and only that. And then um how do I explain this? It's almost like we find joy in like in this whole complexity. It's just not just a tropical setup. Like, no, we can name every single plant species in that
mhm.
in that tank that we have, right?
yeah,
So it's kind of like we find joy in that, and that's part of the beauty of the hobby. So the basis is like we like to create ecosystems. That's why we do this, right? So that's kind of the basis of the hobby, right? So we love to design ecosystems, and it's kind of like our artwork, you know.
Mm.
And the cool thing about the hobby is that we our artwork is actually dynamic, you know. It's not like we finish the painting and then it's done. It's more like, oh, we constantly have to work on it, you know, and we constantly can improve it even. So that's kind of cool. And uh, when you think about it, when you go full nerdy on one topic within the hobby, it's like so much more enjoyable because the more you know about it, the more you can enjoy it. I like to give the example of like if you go to an art museum, right? And
Mm.
there's one person that just says like, oh yeah, that's a nice painting. I kind of like it. And there's another person that studied art, and they will see so much more in that painting. They just don't say, oh yeah, that's kind of nice. They will know exactly what the historical context of the painting is. They will know exactly like the life story of the artist, you know.
Mm.
And they because they know so much more about it, I think it's much more enjoyable for them. Instead of just saying, oh yeah, it looks nice, it's like, oh, do you know that was the last painting of this artist? And it was created in that historical era, and that's why it's so special, and that's the subtle meaning behind it. It's so much more enjoyable if you go full on nerd about something and like yeah, that's and the same can be said with our hobby, you know. If you know about ecology and you go into the forest, you will a walk in the forest is always nice, right? But if you know about biology and ecology, you will see so many things that people that don't know as much about it will just miss, you know? Maybe you hear a bird sound and know exactly what species it
Mm.
is, or know why that bird is exactly in that tree. Or, for example, I think the more you know about something, the more enjoyable it is. And if you focus on a bioregion, for example, whether it's like the Guiana Shield or Southeast Asia or I don't know, arid regions, and then yeah, it's just you can become specialized. So
Mm.
that's like the nice thing about it, I think.
Yeah, that's true.
But then again, it's like very subjective, you know. I cannot tell you why I like the animals that I actually like, and I think some herbs are are a bit ugly. I have no desire keeping them, but you know what I mean. But
Yeah.
yeah, it's just very subjective, I think. And you said another thing, Stefan, is for you, the terrarium hobby and the aquarium hobby was always like one thing, right? And I fully agree with it. So for me, it was the same. It was just, again, this like, I want to keep this animal. How do I do it? And for me, it doesn't really matter if it's like an isopod species or a reptile species or a fish. I will go through all the steps with the same way, right? I will try to find as much info as I can on them. And then I try to think about how I can provide these things in my place. But I think when you say like the aquarium hobby and the terrarium hobby is for you, it's like one thing because you keep a lot of aquatic species as well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I thought about this, and maybe for me that's like one of the things that distinguishes the European hobby a little bit from the American hobby. Um,
Mm.
because there's many people that just grew up you know, keeping fish, and then they had a leopard gecko, and then this and that. Like, for me, it's always the same thing. You try to design an ecosystem, you know, and try to keep living things in there, plants and animals, you know. I see it through exactly the same lens. And when you look at the American hobby, it's more like just about the animal. It's not like, oh, what kind of plants are in the habitat or whatever. It's just like, oh, I want to keep this animal. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Um, maybe like I don't want to bash all the American keepers, obviously, but the
Yeah, do it,
general,
do it.
no, but generally what you see is like at least back in the day, it's just like, oh, we have this plane set up, and yeah, that's how I kept the animal all the time. But if you ask the same people like what other animals are in the area or what kind of plants are in the area where this animal actually comes from, they will probably not know. Or if you ask them, hey, have you ever kept fish? You know, they will probably say no, because it's like, for them, it's just about that one animal. But I believe, at least, we kind of see a bit more of a broad picture. Again, not to say that there aren't people in other regions of the world that don't do the same thing. Like, I think now, in times of social media and the internet, it's like very much cross-pollination going on. But at least when you think of stereotypes, I think that's one of the things that's distinguishing, I believe.
I love how smoothly you went into that topic. Like, but perfect for the podcast. My compliments. But yeah, I do get that perception definitely from your side, and I love how you said it is more about just the animal, because we have talked almost 2 hours now, and we have not almost not directly discussed like straight on care or for certain species, but we have talked about all the elements that surround what we are doing for that animal, you know? So
yeah, that's great. Yeah. I think we should also stir through the end, you know. But maybe you can tease the people what happened at your place, and we maybe can use this one, and then the next episode with you is gonna be okay. This is how I
Straight
get
to the point.
that point.
Only Abronia talk.
Yeah.
And also outdoor keeping. I would like to discuss outdoor keeping, because currently I keep them outside. And I just had a talk with Sam Aneka, I think, from Antwerp. You know him? And we had a video call today, and he showed me some of his outdoor setups, and it's insane. Like, and we discussed some philosophies, and yeah, that's another thing I wanted to touch on. If we can do that, I thought about the whole difference between American herpetoculture and European herpetoculture, and another thing that I noticed is that the Europeans, if you think about it, like, Europe is big and there's different countries. Not like the US is much bigger, actually, but it's all just one country, right? And yeah, you have different climate zones, but you just have like one culture overall, at least roughly, right? But at the same language, for example. And in Europe, it's like all these scattered little countries, and then you have different mentalities of people there and different economic situations. I think that's something that I thought about. And for example, when we go way back, right? So a lot of the pioneers, let's be honest, they were from Europe, and they had like this high level of nerdiness that we also display. They had that like 30, 40 years ago. But if you think about it, they had to deal with like much more challenges, because there was no internet, for example, and the the technical equipment that we use was not as high. So I think one thing that they developed that's very unique to at least some European keepers is like the level of creativity, you know? Because in some places you have to get creative. In, like, I don't know, Czech Republic 30 years ago, people were already breeding reptiles, but with a much lower tech level, I think. So they had to get creative. For example, I actually love reptile books that are written in the 70s or something. I have a bunch of those, and the information is still good. Like, usually they kept them in like really small tanks, which is kind of terrible, but the overall information that's provided in these books is quite interesting. And one thing that they do, they were really creative how to provide the proper conditions for them. Back to the feeder insects, some of them only had mealworms available, because that's just what was around. There were no big cricket breeders, and then they had the mealworms, and then sometimes the animals would obviously develop some deficiencies, because if they only fed mealworms. But you know what they also did? They used very strange feeder insects. For example, I don't know if you ever had a bag of cornflakes or something, and there's like these larvae in it. It's like moths, some moth larvae, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I know
And
which one you mean. Yeah, I don't know
yeah,
the
yeah.
name, but I know which one you mean.
And
We find
people
them
in some of
in
these
chicken.
books, in
We
some
find
of
them in
these
chicken
books,
food a lot.
in the chicken food.
Yeah. We in chicken food there's also often like these larvae, and you get these moths or beetles or
Yeah,
whatever.
right.
Yeah,
And in some of these books, people use that as a feeder culture to feed
amazing.
their baby lizards.
Damn.
So I'm like, that's really creative because
Hmm.
back in like even the part of Germany where I grew up, it was like Germany was divided and people didn't have the same economic backgrounds, than in West Germany, for example, and they had to get creative, with some of the things they were doing. So I think that's one of the things that can um can be said for European herpetoculture, this high level of creativity. And that level of creativity also has influenced the American herpetoculture, I think. Because if you think of one guy, now I'm going back to the outdoor keeping, but one guy that actually pioneered outdoor keeping was Bert Langewerf. If you think about what he did, he's like the perfect example of what I just said. Like he went full on nerd and researched all the reptile species that he could keep outdoors in the summertime in Central Europe because that's where he started. I think he's from Belgium or Netherlands. I'm not sure exactly, but um, so he used to keep like species from Australia, from Morocco, from the Mediterranean, from all these different places outdoors in his backyard in Central Europe, you know? And he was really creative in how he built these cages because for the arid species, he just put glass on top of it so the enclosure heats up really quick. And for the species that are not comfortable with such high temperatures, he just moved them into the shade. So very low tech, very creative, but also very successful. And then I think he first moved to the Canary Islands, did the same thing with like a big breeding facility. So it started to grow his breeding facility. And then he moved to Alabama, I think, right? And then I think he introduced tegus to the American hobby, the Australian water dragons, Shinisaurus. Like he bred so many cool things there, all in like very low tech setups. And it's just genius if you think about it, just very
Mm.
creative, but also a sign that he actually understood what the animal needs. So, and that like style of outdoor keeping kind of, I think, influenced the American hobby because in America there's many places with very suitable conditions to keep animals outdoors. In Florida, for example. But yeah, I think maybe you should get Sam on. We talked about this today, but there are so many animals that are possible to keep outdoors in
Mm.
summertime. It's insane actually. From Australia, again, from Morocco, the southern US, like you could even here in Germany, like my Abronia are from the highlands of Central America, right? And I keep them outdoors here. And it sounds crazy, but it's actually like almost ideal if you watch for certain stuff that it doesn't
Mm.
get too hot, for example, or that you always miss during dry periods and stuff. But just these little tweaks that you can do to create a good microclimate for them. So much can be done outdoors. I know people that keep Uromastyx outdoors and
Mm.
or Phrynosoma, for example, like arid species, and they are thriving, and insane. And when I say outdoors, like here in Central Europe, so you just have to use a little bit of creativity, and again, many ways lead to the desired outcome. Um,
Mm.
to finish this whole thing off, I would like to tease the people a little bit about my Abronia. I just had 2 litters of Abronia, so this is actually the fifth year of consecutive Abronia breeding for me,
Mm.
which is really nice. And I honestly don't think too many people can say that. There are some like big names in the hobby, but not. It shows a certain type of consistency, I think,
Mhm.
which is
Yeah.
also important. Just getting one animal and next year you're kind of bored of it and you pass it on to the next person. It happens, definitely. Like I've been there, but I try to avoid it. Like I try to pick animals that I really want to get, and then even if they don't show themselves as much or some problems arise, I try to stick with them just just out of sheer commitment, you know. But I also understand that for whatever reason you just relocate them maybe. But I think commitment is also very important in a hobby. So I had like 2 litters, and the first time I bred the Abronia litroschila. So I had like a nice litter of them, and they're still not still, they're already outdoors, and I keep them exactly like the parents, and they're doing great. So yeah,
And
we can
that's the
discuss that
teaser,
next time.
guys. And that's the teaser.
Congratulations, man. So cool.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, man, I'm
Congrats,
really happy
man.
about it.
Yeah, I think as you guys can hear, it's like Jonas is super into this hobby, and that's why we are doing this whole podcast. And I think it was a super crazy good episode. I really enjoyed it. I think we can talk for hours and hours more, but I think for now it's like perfect. What do you say, Stefan?
Let's do that. Let's do that. We'll have Jonas back on. Thank you so much for doing this with us, and I think this is a great example of what we were trying to do. So thank you so much.
Yeah. And maybe
Thank you
maybe
guys. It was
Jonas, tell
amazing.
the listeners where they can hit you up if they want to talk to you.
Sure. The best way would probably be Instagram at Jungle Jones. That's Jungle JONZ. And yeah, it's a private page. You can send me a friend request. And yeah, if you have any questions about Spherodactylus or Abronia, I'm always happy to talk about it. Sometimes I'm a bit slow to answer, but yeah, you can always send me a message. And yeah, I would be happy to meet new people that way.
Yeah, awesome. That way,
Yeah.
people, go like and subscribe our channel on YouTube, listen on Spotify, and follow us on Instagram at European Herpetoculture Podcast. And yeah, thank you for listening and supporting us. Peace out.
Bye bye.
You've done it.